He canceled his evening tavern visits, stopped buying new clothes every month, and learned to find joy in simplicity. His gold no longer slipped through his fingers like sand. The city noticed. Others, too, began to question how they lived. They gathered under the olive trees and at the temple steps, eager to hear Arkad's lessons. He became a beacon not just of wealth, but of clarity. The third law: make thy gold multiply. Savings alone were not enough. Gold must work. Idle coins are lazy slaves. But invested wisely, they breed more coins, and their offspring do the same. Arkad told the tale of a farmer who planted a single fig tree. In time, it bore fruit. He took the seeds from those figs and planted more. In a few years, he owned a grove. So too with money. Bansir took his small savings and lent them carefully to a shield maker, a friend who needed capital to fulfill a large order. In return, he received a portion of the profits. For the first time, his money brought money, without sweat, without strain. The fourth law: guard thy treasure from loss. A Babylonian proverb warned, "He who takes advice from fools will surely pay for it in silver." Bansir learned this the hard way. Encouraged by a well-meaning neighbor, he once invested in rare jewels from Syria, but the merchant was a fraud. He lost everything. Arkad did not scold him. Instead, he taught him to seek counsel only from those skilled in their craft. "Would you trust a baker with advice about emeralds?" Arkad asked. Bansir never forgot it. The fifth law: make of thy dwelling a profitable investment. Own thy home, Arkad said. Let not thy gold feed another man's purse. So Bansir saved and eventually purchased a modest home. His family's joy was unmatched. No more rent, no more fear of eviction. For the first time, they built a life on a foundation that was truly theirs. The sixth law: secure a future income. Wealth is not just for today, but for tomorrow. For illness, for old age, for one's children. Kabi began setting aside coins for his future and taught his sons to do the same. They no longer saw saving as sacrifice, but as security, as strength. The seventh and final law: increase thy ability to earn, learn, grow, add value, become more skilled, more knowledgeable, more indispensable. Both Bansir and Kabi took apprenticeships, learned to read contracts, and studied trade. They went from laborers to leaders in their crafts. Years passed. The once struggling scribe became a wealthy man, not overnight, not through luck, but through discipline, humility, and timeless principles. He would often walk with his son by the river and point to the city skyline. Babylon rose not through war, but through wisdom, he said. Its walls were not its strength, its habits were. Though Babylon eventually crumbled, its wisdom did not. The clay tablets, passed down and later reimagined by George S.1 Clason in the 20th century, carried this knowledge to a new world, a world that needed it just as desperately. In today's digital age, we live faster but think less. We swipe more but save less. We chase riches yet flee from responsibility. The Richest Man in Babylon isn't just a book, it's a mirror, showing us that what worked 4,000 years ago still works today. Because wealth isn't found in trends, it's found in timeless truths. Truths that begin, as Arkad once said, by paying thyself first. In the scorching heart of Babylon, where the Euphrates flowed like a vein of life, and merchants bustled through narrow streets with goods from across the ancient world, lived a man whose name would echo through generations. Arkad. But Arkad did not begin as a legend. He was not born into wealth or privilege. His hands were once ink-stained, his days long, and his pay modest. He was a scribe, a simple recorder of transactions, laws, and royal decrees. Each morning, he walked past lavish homes and bustling markets, dreaming silently of a life beyond his modest quarters. He wanted more, not out of greed but out of longing. Longing for freedom, for dignity, for the power to care for his family without fear or lack. As Arkad often told the younger men who later gathered to hear him speak, I desired not the gold itself, but the independence it could bring. One fateful day, while copying a trade agreement between a wealthy merchant and a buyer from Nineveh, Arkad paused. He stared at the figures. The merchant's profit was enormous, tenfold what he had invested. Arkad's curiosity sparked like a flame. What did this merchant know that I do not? He began to ask questions, not foolish ones, but thoughtful ones. Why do the rich seem to grow richer while others struggle endlessly? What rules govern wealth the way laws govern the stars and tides? Unlike others who waited for fortune or feared wealth as corrupting, Arkad pursued it with reverence, as a craft to be studied. His turning point came when he met Algamish, a rich moneylender known for both his silver and his temper. Algamish hired Arkad to inscribe a new legal scroll, but Arkad had a price: wisdom. "I will work through the night, and I will finish your scroll," Arkad said, "but in return, you will teach me how to become rich." The moneylender, amused yet intrigued by the scribe's audacity, agreed. When Arkad handed over the scroll at sunrise, Algamish sat beside him and asked a simple question. "What do you know of wealth?" "I try to save, but expenses always rise to match my earnings," Arkad admitted. Algamish laughed. "You are like every man who thinks he cannot afford to save but can afford to stay poor." And then Algamish gave him a truth that would change everything. A part of all you earn is yours to keep. Not the food, not the rent, not the clothes, but the 1/10 he must set aside for himself. Every coin saved was a slave, working to build a future where money worked for him, not the other way around. Arkad took this lesson seriously. For 12 months, he saved 1/10 of every copper he earned. It wasn't easy. Friends laughed, expenses pulled at him like hungry dogs, but he held firm. After a year, he brought his small treasure to a brickmaker, convinced by the promise of profitable foreign gems. But the brickmaker knew nothing of jewels, and the scheme collapsed. Arkad lost everything. When Algamish returned and learned of the blunder, he did not scold. He laughed. "You trusted a brickmaker with gems? You sought advice from a man who knew not his trade. Learn this, scribe. Gold clings to the protection of the wise and slips away from the reckless." It was the second great lesson. Invest only where your capital is safe and where you understand the risk. Arkad listened. He began saving again, diligently, methodically. This time he lent his money to a shield maker who needed bronze to fulfill a military order. The craftsman returned his investment with a profit, and Arkad reinvested. Soon the small coppers became silver, then gold. But Arkad didn't stop there. He became a student of finance, a silent observer of those who thrived and those who floundered. He learned the third lesson: let thy gold multiply. He did not keep money idle. He lent it, invested it, and watched it grow through careful, deliberate action. Arkad also understood something most ignored: the power of consistency. Wealth was not lightning, it was dripping water carving stone over time. He kept records of every coin. He adjusted, he reviewed, he learned. With each mistake, he grew wiser. With each success, he grew wealthier. Not just in coin, but in confidence, judgment, and self-respect. Years passed. Arkad's name became synonymous with abundance. He bought land, funded caravans, and employed dozens. His home became a place of learning. The poor came not for gold, but for guidance. He never hoarded knowledge. "You cannot fill your purse," he would say, "until you fill your mind." He taught 7 basic laws to those who would listen, lessons rooted in his own journey. Start thy purse to fattening. Save at least 10%. Control thy expenditures. Spend less than you earn, always. Make thy gold multiply. Invest wisely so your money earns more. Guard thy treasures from loss. Don't gamble or fall for empty promises. Make of thy dwelling a profitable investment. Own your home if you can. Ensure a future income. Plan for the uncertainties of life. Increase thy ability to earn. Constantly learn and improve your skills. These weren't just theories. They were tools, forged in hardship and tested in time. As Arkad's influence grew, he challenged kings and commoners alike to rethink wealth, not as a gift of the gods, but as a science and a discipline. He became Babylon's first true financial educator, the original influencer, long before the age of viral videos and sponsored content. But unlike modern influencers selling dreams with no foundation, Arkad sold wisdom. He gave practical, actionable steps, grounded in ancient truths. He warned against envy. Wealth is not a race, it is a personal journey, he would say. The goal is not to outshine others but to outgrow your former self. He reminded the young that it wasn't about earning more, but keeping more of what they earned. He reminded the old that it's never too late to build a future of peace, and he lived what he taught. Though he possessed chariots, land, and riches, Arkad never lost his humility. He dressed simply. He lived with intention. He remembered what it felt like to struggle, and used that memory as fuel to help others. One morning, years after his rise, he met a young apprentice with hopeful eyes and worn sandals. "Master Arkad," the boy asked, How did you become so rich? And Arkad smiled, as he always did when asked that question. He led the boy to a fig tree in his courtyard and plucked a single seed. Because I planted this, he said, when I had only one. The sun had barely risen over the city of Babylon when the courtyard outside Arkad's home began to fill. Young traders, apprentice scribes, even seasoned merchants came, each eager to learn the secrets of wealth from the man who had turned coppers into gold and wisdom into prosperity. Arkad greeted them not with grandeur but with a knowing smile, carrying only a scroll and a reed pen. He sat beneath a fig tree, and with the confidence of a man who had lived through hardship and triumph, he spoke not in riddles but in rules. Let me share, he said, the 7 cures for a lean purse, rules so timeless, the gods themselves would nod in approval. A hush fell over the crowd. Even the birds in the tree seemed to listen. Point 1. Start thy purse to fattening. Arkad began with the most foundational law. Every 10 coins thou earneth, keep 1 for thyself. The audience shifted, some scoffed. But expenses, food, rent, sandals for our feet, Arkad chuckled. And yet you paid yourself nothing? He told the story of his early days, when he barely earned enough for bread and figs, but he forced himself to set aside just 1 coin in 10. At first it felt impossible, but soon he learned to adapt. His mind became sharper, finding ways to live with less. That 1 coin became 10, then 100. Saving, he said, wasn't about how much you earned, it was about discipline. If you cannot save money on a small income, you will not save it on a large one, he warned. From that day forward, every person there began keeping a purse within a purse, 1 for spending, 1 for growing. 2. Control thy expenditures. Arkad stood and held up a worn scroll filled with scribbles and calculations. He said, was my first monthly ledger. He confessed to once believing that he had no luxuries, only necessities. Yet when he began tracking every coin, he discovered that many of his needs were nothing more than passing desires. An extra cup of honey wine, a finer tunic, gifts to impress a neighbor. Learn the difference, he said, between a need and a want, between a wise purchase and a foolish indulgence. He taught them to create budgets, not to restrict joy, but to control it. To make spending intentional, not emotional. A young merchant asked, but what if joy is found in the little indulgences? Arkad smiled. Then indulge a little, but not with the 10th coin you're saving. Joy tastes sweeter when you've earned it twice, once in work, once in wisdom. 3. Make thy gold multiply. Now Arkad's tone became excited, like a craftsman discussing his tools. Saving is noble, but savings must be set to work. He explained how he lent his early savings to a bronze shield maker, earning a steady interest on his money. That shield maker paid him with profits from military contracts, and Arkad reinvested those profits. Soon, his gold had children, and those children had grandchildren. Each coin saved becomes a worker, he said. If left idle, it sleeps. But when invested wisely, it builds houses, funds voyages, feeds empires. He warned against locking savings in fear. A buried coin grows no branches. Arkad's listeners began to see wealth not as treasure to be hoarded, but as a living force, one that could expand beyond imagination if treated with care. Point 4. Guard thy treasures from loss. Then came the cautionary tale. Arkad recalled his mistake of investing with a brickmaker who promised profits from rare gems. The result? Ruin. Gems turned out to be colored glass, and his hard-earned savings were gone. Gold is cunning, he said. It flees the careless, it resents foolish trust. He taught that investments should be made only with guidance from the experienced. A farmer knows crops, a merchant knows trade, a fool knows only dreams. He emphasized due diligence, understanding where money goes and why. The crowd nodded, many realizing that their great opportunities had often been born from desperation, not sound judgment. 5. Make thy dwelling a profitable investment. Arkad gestured toward his own modest home in the corner of Babylon. For years I rented a room, it drained my coin like a leaky jug. Then he bought land and built his own house. The mortgage he paid was less than rent. And when the home was his, no landlord could raise the price. More importantly, he said, it gave his family security and his heart pride. He encouraged them to do the same, to turn their dwellings into assets, not liabilities, to plant roots and create a place where wealth could grow. It is not grandeur that makes a home profitable, he explained, but ownership. Even the poorest in the crowd looked at their simple shelters differently. 6. Ensure a future income. Now his voice turned gentle, like a father speaking to his children. We are not young forever. What of sickness? What of age? What of our loved ones if we should pass? He spoke of ensuring not only life but legacy. He told of men who worked hard all their lives but died leaving nothing for their families, and others who, through foresight, left land, coin, and peace of mind. Arkad urged them to prepare for the unexpected, not with fear, but with wisdom. Through savings, investments, and agreements, a future could be protected long before it arrived. A wise man plans for winter while it is still summer, he said. Heads bowed and hearts reflected. 7. Increase thy ability to earn. Lastly, Arkad raised his hands to the sky. All the gold in the world cannot help a man who refuses to grow. He told them of how he studied the art of writing with perfection, how he practiced math at night by candlelight. He learned from merchants, traders, and priests, not out of requirement but hunger. The more you learn, the more you earn, he said. He challenged each person to become better than they were yesterday, to study their craft, refine their skills, expand their knowledge. Even a sandal maker, he said, could become rich if he made the finest sandals in all Babylon and knew how to sell them well. Gold follows value. Become valuable. As the fig tree's shadow lengthened, the crowd remained still, absorbing every word. These weren't just rules, they were revelations. Arkad dismissed them not with fanfare, but with a final truth. Build thy fortune not in haste, but in harmony with these laws. Wealth that comes quickly is like a storm, it crashes, and then it's gone. Wealth built slowly, patiently, wisely, that is Babylonian wealth. That is lasting wealth. And so they rose, each man and woman carrying not just the weight of copper or silver in their purses, but the treasure of timeless truth in their minds. It was nearly midnight in a buzzing city. Neon lights flickered outside cafes still open, and the sound of clicking keyboards and delivery scooters echoed through the streets. Inside a high-rise apartment, Jordan sat at his desk, bleary-eyed and tired. He had 2 screens open, one for his day job, which somehow spilled into the night, and another for his side hustle, dropshipping products he didn't even use himself. His social media feed was flooded with others just like him. Quotes from self-proclaimed millionaire influencers. Sleep is for losers. Work 18 hours a day or stay broke. Grind now, shine later. Every post felt like both a challenge and a warning. If he wasn't working, he was wasting his life. Rest? That was a luxury for the weak. And yet, despite all the hustling, Jordan still lived paycheck to paycheck. That night, desperate for a change, he stumbled across an old audiobook, The Richest Man in Babylon. Curious, he pressed play. What could an ancient city possibly teach him about modern money? The story took him to the sun-baked streets of Babylon, where a poor scribe named Arkad turned his life around not with flashy schemes, but with timeless discipline. There were no viral trends, no crypto launches, no 10x coaches yelling in his ear. Just parables. Simple, yet profound. Jordan leaned back in his chair watching the Babylonian city unfold in his mind. Merchants bartered in the market, caravans brought spices, textiles, and rare gems. Yet the most valuable currency wasn't gold, it was wisdom. He started to see the first parallel. The illusion of quick wealth. In Babylon, there were also dreamers, men who wagered their last coin on horse races or get-rich-quick schemes whispered in alleys. One tale in the book spoke of a man who gave all his savings to a foreign trader who promised a fortune in jewels. The result? He returned with polished glass. Jordan chuckled. It reminded him of his own attempt at crypto investing. He had poured $1,000 into a token called Lunadog X, just because an influencer swore it would go to the moon. Instead, it crashed within days. The Babylonians had a name for that. Financial foolishness. As Arkad had said, gold clingeth to the protection of the cautious owner who invests it under the advice of men wise in its handling. Nothing had changed. The medium was different, but the temptation of fast wealth was the same. Part 2: The myth of the hustle. The modern world glorified the grind, sleep deprivation, multitasking, and endless ambition. But Babylon taught something different: sustainable prosperity. Work hard, yes, but also work smart. Jordan recalled a scene where Arkad advised a crowd, "Start thy purse to fattening, control thy expenditures, make thy gold multiply." There was no mention of burnout, only balance, Discipline with rest, intention with energy. Back in the city, Jordan saw his own routine for what it was: chaos dressed as ambition. He wasn't investing in himself, he was exhausting himself. In Babylon, merchants rested at sunset. They honored rhythm, not just results. They invested in learning, not just labor. What if he did the same? 3. Ownership over illusion. A tale from the book described how Arcad urged young men to own their homes. Rent, he warned, was like pouring water into a broken jar. It vanished, never to return. Ownership gave security, pride, and permanence. Jordan looked around his rented apartment. The landlord had raised the rent twice this year. Still, he felt he was doing okay because of the view and the smart TV. But Babylon's lessons stung. Status was fleeting. Wealth was not what you showed, it was what you kept. Jordan ran some numbers. With a bit of saving and discipline, he could afford a small condo within 2 years. The idea sparked something deeper: long-term vision. 4. Investing wisely versus gambling blindly. Another story told of a man who gave his coins to a shield maker only after understanding his trade and demand. The investment bore fruit, but when that same man handed his savings to a baker who wanted to buy camels, he lost everything. The baker knew bread, not camels. Jordan remembered investing in a startup run by a friend who barely understood business but had a flashy deck. It crashed within months. He had been investing based on emotion, not due diligence. From now on, he vowed he would study where his money went. He would ask the hard questions. He would say no more often than yes. 5. Future-proofing over flex culture. Babylon valued planning. One story spoke of a man who saved not just for himself but for his children and his old age. He didn't rely on luck or charity. He built a cushion for tomorrow, starting today. Jordan thought about how many of his peers were one emergency away from financial ruin. No health insurance, no savings, but plenty of online purchases and bar tabs. He decided to set up an emergency fund that week. The Babylonian way was not just about earning wealth, it was about preserving it. 6. Skill building beats status chasing. One of Arcad's last lessons was this: increase thy ability to earn. In Babylon, a man grew wealth not only through saving and investing, but through constant self-improvement. A cart maker learned how to carve faster. A scribe studied law to expand his clientele. A merchant mastered new languages to trade in foreign lands. Jordan had 3 online certifications in things he barely remembered. He was so busy chasing quick gigs that he never took time to master one valuable skill. He picked up a notepad and wrote down 3 skills he would commit to improving over the next year. Not for a raise tomorrow, but for value forever. 7. The power of consistency. Above all, Babylon taught this: wealth is a result of daily, deliberate choices, not chance. The richest men didn't leap forward overnight. They moved inch by inch, coin by coin. Over time, their fortune grew like a tree, slow at first, but unstoppable once rooted. Jordan closed the audiobook and stepped away from his desk. He deleted 3 get-rich-quick email subscriptions. He unsubscribed from 2 hustle culture YouTube channels. He replaced them with a simple system: save 10% of all income, budget every dollar, invest in what he understands, learn 1 skill per quarter, rest without guilt. Think in decades, not in days. Weeks passed, then months. Jordan didn't become a millionaire overnight, but slowly, the chaos faded, his finances stabilized, his anxiety dropped, and for the first time in years, he felt in control. Babylon hadn't died. It had just changed its costume. Its streets were now digital, its coins now numbers on a screen, but its wisdom, eternal. And in that ancient whisper, Jordan found a new truth. Real wealth is built with patience, not panic. With principles, not pressure. With purpose, not pride. And in a world that told him to hustle harder, he chose instead to hustle smarter. The Babylonian way. Maya scrolled through her banking app again. Her paycheck had hit her account only 2 days ago, but already, more than half of it was gone. Rent, student loan payments, that food delivery she swore would be a one-time thing, a new hoodie from a flash sale, and subscriptions she forgot she even had. She sighed, staring at the glowing screen in the darkness of her apartment. Like many of her Gen Z peers, Maya was trying to juggle 1,000 things at once. Rising inflation, job insecurity, the pressure to appear successful online, and the burden of financial literacy no one taught her in school. Earlier that week, a friend had jokingly said, "Our generation needs a miracle. Or a rich uncle." Maya laughed at the time, but the weight of that joke now felt too real. Then, while doom-scrolling TikTok, she stumbled upon something odd. A quiet video with an old parchment background, and the title, The 7 Rules of Wealth from 4,000 years ago. Curious and a little desperate, she tapped play. The video talked about a man named Arkad, once a poor scribe in Babylon who became the richest man in the city. It wasn't magic, it wasn't crypto, it wasn't even compound interest. It was discipline, strategy, and ancient wisdom. The narrator said something that hit Maya hard. Gold comes gladly, and in increasing quantity, to any man who will put by not less than 1/10 of his earnings to create an estate for his future and that of his family. She paused the video and rewound that line. 1/10. Just 10%. Was that really all it took to begin? Could ancient Babylon possibly hold the answers she'd been missing in this modern mess? The next day, Maya shared the video with her friend Ethan, a millennial in his early 30s. He laughed at first. "Come on, Babylon? Like Mesopotamia Babylon?" he chuckled, but curiosity got the better of him too. Later that week, Ethan called her with a changed tone. "You know what's wild? That stuff actually makes sense. Like, we're out here trying to build wealth on vibes and Wi-Fi, but those people literally built empires on coins and clay tablets." They made a pact. Each would read The Richest Man in Babylon, try to apply just one principle per week. The first week was humbling. Maya tracked her expenses. For the first time, she saw the full breakdown of her spending. $38 on coffee, $90 on food delivery, $15 on a meditation app she hadn't opened in 3 months. She remembered one Babylonian rule: control thy expenditures. Arkad had said that people often confuse desires with necessities. Even when they earn more, they still spend it all. Sounded just like her raise from last year, vanished without a trace. She canceled 3 subscriptions and committed to brewing coffee at home. Ethan, on the other hand, was working on Start Thy Purse to Fattening. He opened a high-yield savings account and set up an auto-transfer of 10% of his paycheck every month. "It's weird," he told Maya. "I feel more powerful already. Like I've planted a tree, and someday it'll give me shade." In the second week, Maya started looking into investments. Carefully. She wasn't diving into meme stocks or the latest viral token. Instead, she applied Arkad's lesson. Make thy gold multiply. Babylonians didn't gamble with wealth. They invested in ventures they understood. When Maya sat with her bank's financial advisor, she asked questions she'd never thought to ask. What are the risks? What's the track record? Who's managing this? She wasn't chasing fast returns. She was planting seeds, slow, stable, and strategic. By the 4th week, Ethan decided to tackle Arkad's 4th cure. Guard thy treasures from loss. That meant saying no to speculative investments. He had nearly joined a startup as a silent partner just because it sounded trendy. But remembering a Babylonian who gave all his coins to a brickmaker investing in jewels, and lost it all, Ethan paused. He asked, "Do I really trust the person? Do they have experience? Do I understand what I'm investing in?" He pulled out before wiring the money. A month later, that startup ghosted its early backers. The biggest shift, however, wasn't just in their wallets. It was in their minds. For Maya, Babylon taught her that wealth wasn't about flashy things. It was about freedom. The freedom to say no to toxic jobs. The freedom to take a break without guilt. The freedom to breathe. When she read Arkad's words, "A part of all I earn is mine to keep," she realized how often she had earned, only to give it all away to landlords, subscriptions, taxes, or impulse buys. Now, she paid herself first. Ethan, meanwhile, started teaching his younger cousin what he'd learned. "No one taught me this stuff," he said. "But if you learn now, you won't have to learn the hard way." They sat at a coffee shop and made a simple budget on a napkin. They even gave it a Babylonian twist. Temple fund for savings, merchant's gold for investments, daily bread for expenses. It felt silly, but it worked. Over the next few months, they built habits. Maya used envelopes, yes, physical envelopes, for budgeting. She started a side hustle, but this time with intention. She used profits to pay down student loans, not to splurge. Ethan began learning about real estate, not to flip homes overnight, but to someday own one. Babylon had said, "Make thy dwelling a profitable investment." He wasn't there yet. But he was moving. And then came the moment that confirmed it all. Maya's car broke down. A year ago, it would have thrown her into panic. she'd have borrowed money or maxed a credit card. But this time, she tapped into her emergency fund. No stress, no begging, no debt. She sat on the curb next to her repaired car, smiling at how different things were. Babylon had given her a gift she didn't know she needed. Not riches, but resilience. For millennials and Gen Z, the world is full of noise, shiny apps, fast money, and endless pressure to keep up. But the city of Babylon, buried in dust and time, whispers something different. Slow down, save first, spend wisely, learn always, rest without guilt, grow with purpose. The more they listened, the clearer it became. The world may change, but wisdom doesn't. And so, in a world of short attention spans and long financial battles, the ancient city stood tall, not as a ruin, but as a roadmap. Because sometimes to survive the future, you must learn from the past. And Maya, Ethan, and millions like them were ready to do just that, the Babylonian way. On a quiet evening in Babylon, when the golden sun bathed the sandstone buildings in amber light, a man named Dabasir walked slowly through the market. The smell of incense and baked bread filled the air. Traders shouted in cheerful tones, customers bargained with laughter, and the clinking of coins echoed from the stalls. But Dabasir didn't hear any of it. He carried no gold in his pouch that day. His clothes were modest, his sandals worn thin, and his past, well, it weighed heavier than any purse. He had once been a slave, not just to a master, but to his own desires. Years ago, Dabasir had borrowed more than he could repay. He spent without care, chasing pleasures, ignoring warnings, and living beyond his means. When the debts piled high and the creditors came knocking, he fled Babylon in shame, leaving his honor behind. He ended up in the deserts, captured and sold as a slave to a Syrian merchant. There, with chains on his wrists and sand in his eyes, Dabasir had a revelation, not about gold, but about character. "My body is not built to serve others," he once whispered into the cold desert night. "I am a free man, and I shall live like one again." It wasn't arrogance, it was resolve. His master's wife saw something in him, something not yet broken. She taught him how to manage camels, how to trade spices, and more importantly, how to listen. In his silence, Dabasir learned, and in learning, he began to change. Eventually, the chance came. He escaped. He walked through endless miles of desert, driven by only one thing: the desire to repay every coin he had once borrowed and reclaim his name. Back in Babylon, he wasn't welcomed with applause. Old creditors sneered, some laughed. "A debtor returns," they said. "He'll disappear again, once the shame returns." But Dabasir had made a vow not just to pay his debts, but to become a man of worth. He approached every creditor with humility and a plan. Not promises, not excuses, a plan. He would keep 1/10 of his earnings for himself. He would use 7/10 to live and provide for his needs. And with the remaining 2/10, he would repay each lender month by month without fail. They didn't believe him. But Dabasir didn't need belief. He needed discipline. Months turned to years. He worked with determination, never returning to old habits. While others celebrated with wine, he saved. While others mocked his modest clothing, he smiled. His wealth didn't lie in silk or silver. It was in the quiet knowledge that every month he was becoming a man of integrity. Children in the neighborhood came to know him not as a debtor, but as a storyteller. He would gather them in the evenings and tell tales, not of monsters or kings, but of gold, of habits, and of honor. "Gold is but a tool," he'd say. "But a man's word? That is treasure." As Dabasir's debts shrank, his reputation grew. Merchants sought his advice. Young men asked to apprentice under him. His home, once a modest stone room, became a place of counsel for those lost in their own financial storms. But Dabasir never forgot what he'd learned in the desert. One day, a young Babylonian named Nabar came to him. He was dressed well, carried a gold-plated dagger, and wore scented oil in his hair. But under the fragrance, Dabasir smelled desperation. "I've borrowed from 6 men, Nabar admitted. "My trade has failed, and my name is starting to sour. What must I do?" Dabasir didn't scold him. He simply handed Nabar a small clay tablet. On it, in his own hand, were written 3 words: face, own, repair. "Face your truth," he explained. "Own your mistakes, then repair what is broken. That is the path of a wealthy man." What Dabasir taught Nabar, and what Babylon taught us all, is that true wealth is never just gold. Gold can be stolen, homes can burn, markets can collapse. But character? That endures. It rebuilds. It attracts new opportunities. In Babylon, The richest men weren't just those with the fattest purses. They were those whose names were spoken with respect. Arkad, who taught others without pride. Rodin, the spearmaker who sought wisdom before giving gold. Dabasir, the once lost, who found himself through accountability. Fast forward thousands of years and their lessons still whisper through time. Today, you might live in a high-rise apartment instead of a clay house. You might earn with code instead of coin. But the core principles remain unchanged. A young woman, Ava, working in tech in New York City, found herself drowning in credit card debt. She had every modern convenience, a smartphone, food delivery, clothes for every season. But what she lacked was peace. Reading The Richest Man in Babylon one night, something clicked. The story of Dabasir felt oddly familiar. She didn't need more income. She needed integrity. With herself. She made a spreadsheet titled The Dabasir Plan. She reached out to every lender with honesty and humility. She created a budget. She started keeping her promises, to herself and to others. Within a year, not only was Ava debt-free, but she had built a reputation in her company as someone trustworthy, consistent, and wise. Her financial recovery earned her a promotion, not because she had more money, but because she had more value. Real wealth is being the kind of person people trust. It's keeping your word, even when it's inconvenient. It's choosing long-term respect over short-term comfort. It's learning, evolving, and helping others rise once you've stood. Babylon's legacy wasn't just its hanging gardens or giant walls. It was the character of its people. People who fell but stood back up. People who didn't chase luck but cultivated discipline. And maybe that's what we need more than ever today. Not just financial influencers showing luxury cars, but real-life Dabasirs showing how to rise with honor. In a world where it's easy to fake success with filters and debt, the Babylonian path remains radical. Earn with effort, spend with purpose, save with discipline, grow with humility, give with wisdom, and live with honor. Because in the end, your bank balance might fluctuate, but your character is your greatest asset. That is the wealth no one can steal. And that, according to Babylon, is the richest life of all. On a quiet Sunday morning in Atlanta, Ayana sat at her kitchen table with a steaming mug of black coffee, surrounded by opened envelopes, bank statements, and a fresh notebook titled The Wealth Plan. A few years ago, she had stumbled across The Richest Man in Babylon in a thrift store for $1. At the time, she barely had $200 to her name, was behind on rent, and had just lost her job as a junior marketing assistant. But something about the ancient, almost biblical language of the book had stirred her soul. Start thy purse to fattening. That line, strangely poetic and commanding, became her new mantra. Fast forward to today, and Ayana had not only recovered financially, she had transformed her entire approach to money. She had learned to build wealth, not through get-rich-quick schemes or influencer advice, but by applying the ancient Babylonian lessons to her 21st century life. And now, she was ready to help her younger brother, Darius, who had just moved in after graduating college, do the same. Budgeting is the first gate to wealth. She explained to Darius as he scrolled absent-mindedly through his phone. He looked up. Like, I just track what I spend? Isn't that common sense? Ayana smiled. Common sense, yes. Common practice? No. She pulled out a small spreadsheet she'd created years ago. On one side were her earnings, freelance marketing gigs, her full-time salary, and a trickle of affiliate marketing income. On the other side, every dollar had a name. Rent, groceries, transportation, savings, investments, fun money. I used to spend without thinking, she said. A coffee here, late-night Uber there. It all felt small until I realized I was losing hundreds every month to things that didn't add real value to my life. In Babylon, they didn't have Uber or lattes, but they still had wants. Arkad taught that you must control your expenditures. That means living not just below your means, but with intention. Darius frowned. So you just cut out fun? Ayana laughed. Not at all. I budgeted fun. That's the difference. When you budget joy, you don't feel guilty about it. You feel empowered. Later that week, she took Darius to her community investment club, 6 friends who met monthly to discuss the stock market, real estate, and crypto responsibly. It was her way of applying the Babylonian principle, make thy gold multiply. What's the modern version of letting your gold work for you? She asked the group rhetorically. as she clicked on a PowerPoint slide showing a timeline of compound interest growth. "It's letting your dollars hustle while you sleep," said Tim, the youngest in the group. Babylonians didn't have index funds, but they understood something even our schools don't teach: money has to move. Stagnant money is dead money. They discussed investing in stocks with long-term value like ETFs and dividend-paying companies. They warned Darius about chasing the latest meme stocks or falling for day trading traps. "It's not about gambling your money," Ayanna added, "but growing it like a careful gardener tends to his orchard." Back home, Darius asked, "How do you even start investing when you're broke?" Ayanna opened her laptop. "You don't wait until you're rich. You invest a tiny percentage, just like Arkad said to save 1/10 of your earnings. Even if you earn $100 a week, you can start with $10. With apps like these," she pointed to a low-fee robo-advisor, "you can start with less than the price of dinner." Over dinner, they tackled the third lesson: continuous learning. "Babylon's richest man wasn't born smart," Ayanna said. "He asked questions, he studied others, he wasn't too proud to learn." Darius nodded. "So I should be reading more?" "Yes, books, podcasts, YouTube, LinkedIn Learning, TikTok, but the right accounts," she winked. "Every dollar you invest in your brain has the highest return." She told him about how she learned digital marketing on free platforms, took $30 Udemy courses, and watched business case studies during her lunch breaks. "Your skills," she said, "are your biggest assets." That Friday, Darius received his first paycheck. As they walked to the bank, Ayanna reminded him of the next Babylonian rule: mindful spending. They passed a sneaker store, and he slowed down. "I've been wanting those new Jordans," he said half to himself. "You can get them," she said, "but know what you're trading them for." He looked at her, confused. "Time," she continued. "You're trading time and freedom for a pair of shoes. Are they worth 5 hours of your life? Will they bring lasting value? Will they grow your wealth or just feed your ego?" He chuckled. Okay, I get it. I'll wait." Months passed. Darius had built a simple budget in Google Sheets, opened a beginner investment account, subscribed to 3 finance podcasts, and started learning code in the evenings. But more importantly, he felt calm. "I always thought money was stress," he told Ayanna one night. "Like either you had it or you were chasing it. I didn't know it could be peaceful." Ayanna nodded. "That's what Babylon teaches us. Money is a tool, not a tyrant. When you respect it, plan with it, and grow it, it works for you." In the final weeks of summer, Darius sat with a notepad in the backyard, scribbling his version of Babylon's rules. Pay yourself first, spend less than you earn, invest early and wisely, avoid dumb risks, build your skills, budget fun, protect your future. Never stop learning, he smiled. These weren't just rules from a dusty book. They were a blueprint, a compass, a way to navigate life in a world full of noise, temptation, and financial chaos. Ancient Babylon may have vanished, but its wisdom had found a new home, in the hearts and habits of those willing to listen, to act, and to believe that wealth was not only possible but attainable, when guided by discipline and purpose. And somewhere in that dusty thrift store book, Arkad was smiling. On a crisp winter evening in Toronto, Marcus leaned against the window pane of his high-rise apartment, staring out at the city lights that stretched endlessly into the horizon. He was preparing his keynote speech for a financial literacy conference, the same conference he had once watched from the back row as a broke 25-year-old delivery driver. 10 years had passed since he first picked up The Richest Man in Babylon on a friend's recommendation. At the time, he was swimming in credit card debt, chasing quick money from side hustles, and jumping from one job to another without direction. But something in those ancient parables struck a chord. The dusty city of Babylon, with its stone walls and golden temples, felt strangely modern in its truths. The advice spoken by Arkad and his fellow wise men rang louder than any online guru's viral post. And now, Marcus was living proof of that legacy. His story began in a cramped basement room he rented in Scarborough. His job paid him just enough to cover rent and ramen noodles. And every financial mistake he made was compounded by pride and ignorance. One night, frustrated by his cycle of lack, he opened Clason's book and read, "A part of all you earn is yours to keep." The simplicity was staggering. No jargon, no complexity, just clarity. Marcus made a silent vow that night. He would begin by saving just 10% of his paycheck, no matter how small it felt. At first, it was laughable. $200 from a weekly paycheck meant setting aside just $20. But Marcus did it anyway, and he did it the next week and the next. Eventually, he saw the wisdom behind the act, not just the amount, but the habit. Within a year, that tiny sum became his emergency fund. Within 3, it became seed money for a small e-commerce business. What Arcad had called starting thy purse to fattening was not merely financial, it was psychological. It built confidence. It built control. It built a mindset. Marcus's journey didn't just involve saving. He recalled the night he sat across from his roommate, scrolling through online ads for luxury sneakers and watches. With every scroll, temptation grew. But then he paused. Control thy expenditures. That second principle had taken root. Babylon had taught him that money was not to be wasted on fleeting pleasures, but used with purpose. He began tracking every dollar. Not obsessively, but intentionally. Soon, he noticed how small daily decisions added up. Canceling subscriptions he never used, packing lunch instead of eating out, walking instead of Ubering. And then came the real breakthrough. Make thy gold multiply. Marcus had memorized that line like scripture. At first it intimidated him. Investment sounded like something rich people did. But Babylon had spoken of lending gold to craftsmen, earning interest, and watching wealth grow, not overnight but over time. So Marcus started small. He opened a low-fee brokerage account and began investing in index funds. He studied the market, listened to audiobooks, and eventually diversified into real estate. He learned to avoid high-risk opportunities, something Babylon warned against as guarding thy treasure from loss. There were moments of doubt. When the market dipped, he felt the tug to pull out. When friends chased the crypto hype and NFT craze, he felt FOMO, but Babylon's voice steadied him. Seek counsel from the experienced. Gold clings to the cautious owner. He realized true wealth wasn't in flashy investments or quick returns. It was in wisdom, patience, and consistency. A few years later, Marcus reached a milestone. He had cleared all his debts, saved a 6-month emergency fund, and invested enough to begin seeing passive income. But more importantly, he began to mentor others. He started a small podcast called Coins of Babylon, a nod to his origins, where he shared simple financial lessons drawn from Clason's book, reinterpreted for the modern world. He interviewed immigrants, single moms, freelancers, college students, ordinary people taking extraordinary control of their financial destinies through ancient wisdom. His episodes went viral, not because they promised riches, but because they offered roots. One story stood out to him the most: a young single mother named Leah from Birmingham, UK. She had written to thank him for the podcast, which had inspired her to change her entire lifestyle. With 2 kids and a part-time job, she began budgeting, saving 5% of her income at first, then 10%, then investing in small dividend stocks and learning how to code online at night. 3 years later, she had moved out of government housing and landed a remote tech job, allowing her to homeschool her kids and save for their future. Her transformation mirrored Arcad's path from lean purse to prosperity, not through magic, but through method. Increase thy ability to earn, Arcad had advised, and Leah had done just that. Marcus sat down at his desk and began to write his keynote. His central message wasn't complex. Wealth is not new, he typed. The tools may evolve, apps, digital banks, automated investing, but the principles are eternal. The legacy of Babylon teaches us this: if you build your foundation on discipline, purpose, and wisdom, you do not need to fear the future. He thought back to the city itself. Babylon, once lost to time, yet still alive in every budgeting app, every savings goal, every investment strategy inspired by its teachings. Its legacy wasn't in the gold it once held, but in the truths it passed on. Today's generation may wear hoodies instead of tunics, trade stocks instead of livestock, and hustle from laptops instead of fields. But they still struggle with the same questions. How do I get out of debt? How do I save more? How do I make my money work for me? How do I secure my future? The answers are not new. They are simply buried beneath the noise, beneath the culture of instant gratification, beneath the myth that wealth must be flashy to be real. Marcus looked out the window one last time before bed. Snowflakes were beginning to fall over the city, blanketing it in silence. Somewhere in that stillness, he imagined the ancient city, its stone walls rising, its merchants haggling in the marketplace, its scribes etching lessons on clay tablets. And Arkad, the richest man in Babylon, standing beneath a palm tree, offering simple advice to those who would listen. And now it was Marcus's turn to pass the torch. The evening sun dipped behind the skyline as Maya closed her laptop. The glow of spreadsheets and budgeting tools faded from her screen, replaced by a reflection, hers. She wasn't the same anymore. A few months ago, she'd been overwhelmed, financially insecure, and emotionally exhausted. But something changed when she stumbled across an old, animated breakdown of The Richest Man in Babylon. She hadn't expected much, maybe a few clever quotes or a lecture on saving money, but what she found was different. It was a story. A story about ancient people with modern struggles, about ordinary individuals turning their gold into empires through self-discipline and principles that stood the test of time. Those parables didn't just inspire her, they gave her tools. She remembered the first practical step she took. A part of all I earn is mine to keep. She'd heard Arkad's voice echo in the back of her mind every time she opened her banking app. From that moment, every paycheck was split with intention. 10% to savings, then later, investments, then even a small donation fund. And just like that, her chaos found clarity. But it wasn't just the money. Maya had grown as a person. Her confidence surged not from what she had in her account, but from knowing that she was no longer a financial victim. She was in control. And now, as she logged into her favorite YouTube channel, Innovative Book Philosophy, she smiled. There it was. A brand new AZ series was launching. Timeless Wealth, the ancient to modern master plan for money, mindset, and meaning. This was what she'd been waiting for. The channel had promised something different this time. Not just reviews, not just breakdowns, but a journey. A video series designed like a map, from the basics of personal finance to the psychology of wealth, the art of decision-making, and even the spirituality of abundance. Each video would be a chapter. Each chapter would be a weapon in her arsenal. The host had teased it at the end of the Babylon series. We've learned from Arkad. Now it's time to learn from the philosophers, the hustlers, the moguls, and the monks. From A to Z, we'll explore the rules no one teaches you. Rules about money, power, happiness, health, and meaning. Maya tapped the notification bell. She wasn't going to miss this. Here's what the roadmap looked like. AZ Series Preview. Timeless Wealth, the Ancient to Modern Master Plan. A. Assets over aesthetics. How modern consumers fall into the trap of spending on status over substance. And how Babylonian principles teach us to prioritize ownership and value. Budgeting like Babylon. Modern tools, ancient structure. Learn how to build a zero-based budget inspired by the principles of temple scribes and merchants. C. Compound interest, the eighth wonder. How to plant your financial seeds and let time turn them into trees of gold. D. Debt slavery, escaping the chains. A deep dive into Babylon's warnings against debt and modern strategies for financial freedom. E. Earning beyond employment. Side hustles, skills, and income streams. How Arkad would have built an empire on the internet. F. Financial freedom formula. A complete step-by-step plan using Babylonian cures and modern money management. G. Goals with grit. Why most goals fail, and how to align purpose with practicality for long-term success. And the series continues, all the way to Z, Zen in the Wealthy Mind, combining Eastern philosophy with Babylonian focus to build mental peace in a material world. Maya could already imagine the lessons ahead, not just dry facts or motivational fluff, but stories. Real people. Modern applications. Entertaining visuals and powerful parables that helped her understand why 10% savings wasn't just a rule, it was a ritual. Why controlling expenditures wasn't about self-denial, but about self-respect. Why gold, when multiplied wisely, could build a future not just of riches, but of freedom. But perhaps what excited her the most was the community. The comment sections under each video had transformed into mini financial forums. People from all walks of life, Gen Z gamers, millennial moms, retirees starting over, shared their journeys, their wins, and even their setbacks. They held each other accountable. Maya remembered one comment thread vividly. A teenager from Brazil had said, "I saved my first $100. I never thought I could do that." Arkad would be proud. And someone had replied, he absolutely would. You've started your purse to fattening. You're on your way. It was more than content. It was a movement. That night, Maya sat down with a cup of tea and opened her journal. At the top, she wrote, "Legacy, not lifestyle." It was something she had heard in episode 6, where the host explained that real wealth wasn't in what you displayed, it was in what you passed on. Babylon's richest men were remembered not for their silk robes or gold chains, but for the knowledge they passed down to others. The wisdom that transformed cities. The character that shaped civilizations. And this series, Maya knew, would be her guide for years to come. So if you, like Maya, have ever asked, how can I stop living paycheck to paycheck? Is it too late to start building wealth? Can ancient ideas really help in a digital world? What if I'm not naturally good with money? Then this is your invitation. You don't need to be an expert. You don't need a 6-figure salary. You don't even need to finish the book today. You just need to start. Start with a story. Start with a parable. Start with a truth whispered from the walls of Babylon that still echoes through your phone screen. So take a moment, click subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this with a friend, someone who's ready to rewrite their money story. Because the journey to wealth, wisdom, and a fulfilled life begins not with gold, but with knowledge. And this series is your map. Your Babylon awaits.